So if you look at back page of your book right before we get to the questions or if you look at the last page of your book before we get to the assignments in figure 5.10, right above it, you'll have applications and sort of doubling and voice leading. So you always want to double the bass note. So if you look at example A, here's our Neapolitan sixth. So we've got, so that's doubled, the F is doubled. Our Neapolitan is, oh, that's too high. Let's do this. Right, so we've got our, sorry. And A flat. Okay, so if we're looking at doubling and voice leading, you always want to double the bass note, okay? So in this case, we've got our Neapolitan sixth, F, A flat, D flat, and then we're going to double the bass, right? Or, okay? So that's the first rule. And then it's always, always, always going to almost go to 5 or 5/7. Chances are it's going to move, Neapolitan 6 is going to move to a 5 chord, all right? And you don't, this is the one instance where you don't want to move the upper voices in chromatic fashion, okay? You want to move it contrary motion, all right? So if the bass note is going up, so from F to G, right? Like that, we want our top notes to move in contrary motion, which is pretty similar to what we've been doing. So we've got, and then we jump actually down to B, like that. We're not going to move it in chromatic fashion. We are going to move it in contrary motion. All right? So contrary motion, that gives us the 5. Right? So we go from A flat and D flat. And then since the bass is walking up, our soprano and alto is going to move down. Like that. Okay? You will also see it move to a 5/7, in which case, if you look at B, letter B, in figure 510, it's going to go from back to our Neapolitan 6, right? And the bass is going to walk up. The two soprano and alto notes are going to come back down. And the tenor is going to hang on that F because it's part of the chord, okay? So it's going to sound like this. All right? So you've got this nice clash between F and G. So what you want to avoid, and this is the example, if you look at C, which is a little bit hard to see, but what we want to avoid is chromaticism, especially in the soprano voice. So the example they give us here, here's our Neapolitan sixth again. Oops, sorry. There we go. Neapolitan sixth. What they don't want is for you to move it down chromatically. So you don't want to go from D flat up to D natural, right? So you don't want this conclusion. That's not considered good. That we want to avoid, right? That's bad, this is good. All right? So we don't want to try to resolve any tritones or do anything like that. So it's going to sound like this is what you want to avoid. Neapolitan sixth, and then it jumps down, right? There we go. That's the right one. Okay, so it's going to sound like this. Just sounds weak. It's a really weak ending. Okay? So we don't want that at all. So avoid chromatic voicing. And then finally, you want to look for parallel fifths. All right? Now, occasionally you're going to get, like in example D, you're going to get a motion to a 1-6-4 chord. And when you're doing that, you have to watch out for parallel fifths. If we look at example E, this is what we want to try to avoid at all costs. So here's our chord. And then moving in parallel fifths, like that, that's what we want to avoid. So we don't want to do this. So the 1-6-4. Sounds weak, sounds a little weird, all right? What we do want to do is flip it. Flip the voices and make sure that they're going in parallel fourths instead of parallel fifths. So instead of that, we get, so instead of having the D flat on the bottom and the A flat on top, making it a perfect fifth in E, we flip it and reverse it. We put the A flat on the bottom and D flat on the top, okay? So then we get parallel fourths, like that, which sounds much better. So it's going to sound like this instead. Much more conclusive. All right? So that's how you deal with voice leading. Generally, it's going to go to 5. Avoid these pitfalls. Again, watch out for parallel fifths. And, yeah. And then move the voices in the opposite direction of the bass. So contrary motion, always good. And the other thing that's special to Neapolitan sixths to avoid is chromatic, so going to the chromatic. So going from D flat to D natural, for example, or from B natural to B flat, something like that. All right, so that's what you want to avoid, is moving the voices chromatically. All right, let's go on to the homework.